Hey, it's Andrew Downs. I'm proud to support Three Beards Media, and I would love to work with you. If you need merchandise for your company, organization, band, softball team, whatever, I can help. From name brand apparel to promotional items, large orders or small, online stores, and more, I can help your brand stand out. AKC Marketing is local, based in Johnston, and we are an employee-owned business, so our costs are low and our turnaround times are fast. But most importantly, we give you personal service to make sure you get exactly what you're looking for. Email me at andrew@akcmarketing.com or find me on social media and let's make some cool stuff together. Now sit back and enjoy this Three Beards Media podcast.
And we're back. I'm Andrew Barber here with Drew Shipley on another lovely edition of the Hawk's Eye View. And the women are taking on Nebraska right now as we're recording this. So we've both got the game on in the background. I know, Drew, it's going well for Iowa early here.
Yeah, so you saw an early 12-8 lead there at the first time out?
14-8, yep. Nice little 14-8 lead. That's nice. Good first 5 minutes for Jan Jensen and the crew. And we kind of talked about it before the show. 3-game losing streak for the first time since, when did you say?
I think Caitlin Clark was a sophomore.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yep.
We're just not used to this with Iowa women's basketball, so we don't know how to react now. We've been so spoiled. We have no clue how to react to the 3-game losing streak. But it seems like the ladies have gotten it together here for this game against Nebraska, which is good. Nebraska's a decent team. I don't know if this is quad one necessarily. I haven't dug too far into the women's net rankings. I would imagine this is probably of the quad two variety.
Yeah, I think you have to be in the top 30 for a home game for quad one. Is that right?
Yeah, Nebraska's probably right on that edge.
It's got to be pretty close because I mean,
yeah,
they in their own right are what? Are they 13-4, 12-4?
Yeah, they have double-digit wins. I know. I can't remember if they're 13-4, 4-2, but unranked. Iowa also 12-5, unranked. But yeah, those last 3 losses, specifically the loss to Indiana, which Indiana's been good, but they're maybe down from where they have been in the past 2.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so down on the 3-game losing streak unless if the opponent was like USC. UCLA,
Maryland,
right? But then you had what, Illinois and Indiana in there?
Yeah, Illinois on the road, which credit to them. Illinois is kind of rising as a women's basketball program right now. Talked about them before the year. That was a team that I knew Iowa was going to struggle with. They're definitely on the come up there. That doesn't lessen the blow, but that back-to-back losses off of that really started with that Maryland game where Iowa fought back, couldn't get over the hump, and then go on the road against a tough opponent to follow that up, not the easiest, and then it kind of snowballs a little bit. So it's good to see them maybe get back in the right side of the win column if they can hold on to this early lead that they got going on, and they really need that because I believe they're still considered in. I saw a bracketology, ESPN bracketology, where they're considered in as one of the last 4 buys, I believe.
I think that's probably fair analysis, but I mean they still got 10 games left in the Big Ten, right? So I mean there's still a lot to be played. Actually, not more than 10. What they're only at 6 now. They play 20 conference games. Is that right?
Yeah, they got 14 games left.
So I mean, you're talking about two plus months of games left. So
and a lot of
I
opportunities.
mean, it's a pivotal game here to stop that streak for sure. And Carver Hawkeye shooting well right now.
Sorry, 11 games left. 3 left after tonight. 11 left after tonight. So tonight is essentially 12.
7. So they play 18 conference games.
18 conference games. Yep. And some opportunities here. Oregon and Washington on the road. That's maybe a little bit of tough stretch there. Oregon has a decent women's program, kind of always. Maybe not to the same level as when Sabrina Ionescu was there, but they're decent. Washington, 12-6, but then home against Northwestern, home against USC to start off February. That's a huge opportunity there. Plenty of opportunities, plenty of time left to kind of move off of that last 4 bye, get a little bit more solidly in.
I love your glass half full perspective, Andrew. You call them opportunities.
Yeah, I mean that's really how you have to look at it, though, because it's all opportunities. I feel the same way about the men's team, and we can kind of talk about that a little bit. I don't expect them to beat USC. I don't expect them to beat UCLA. I am glad that those are home games. So if we were to have a chance, it's probably at home.
For sure.
A tough game against Ohio State on the road, but it feels like you got to kind of sneak in a win against one of those 3 somehow.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And doing that would put you solidly in if you're able to beat one of those 3. I think that kind of puts you on the right side of the bubble, which I didn't think we were going to have a bubble conversation about the women's team this year. But we found ourselves here because of the 3-game losing streak and mostly the turnover problem against a team like Tennessee, turnover problem against who else did we lose to earlier?
How about the current turnover problem against Nebraska right now?
What? I looked down for 1 minute and we are down 5 after being in control. What's going on?
What's going on is Nebraska is 6 of 9 from 3 in the first quarter. That's what's happening.
Turnovers and 3-point defense are really bad for the Iowa women. That's not a good sign because that's kind of one thing that you thought maybe this team would be better at than the previous year's team. Not turnovers necessarily, but defense. The defense I thought would be much better, actually. That has not materialized, so they're going to have to figure that out in game and avoid a 4th straight loss here. That's got me really concerned. So,
yep.
I don't know what you can do because it's just a matter of certain players having to step up. And it's the interesting thing about it is I feel like it's more of the upperclassmen that they need to really step up. I feel like the freshmen have done more than enough for this team. The younger players have done more than enough. I mean, how do you feel?
The same sentiment.
Yeah.
I mean, they finally put Addie O'Grady on the bench at the start of this game, I believe, and had Hannah Stolke in at the 5. So I think that's an improvement automatically.
Yeah.
Taylor McCabe starting tonight too.
Interesting.
You know my love for her, so I still think she's the best shooter on the team.
Yeah.
She did have a good night against Indiana, I believe. 4 of 6, something like that. 4 of 7, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's good.
It's, I don't know, the continuation of trying to replace Caitlin Clark in that era of basketball. I mean, that we just got to put that to bed. That we're back to kind of, what era would you compare this to? Allie Disterhoff?
Yeah, it's kind of that Allie Disterhoff, young Gustafson.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. But I implore fans to think that this is kind of a temporary deal. because we've talked about it on this show. Temporary deal. Wow, I did not plan that because Addison deal is coming in next season, and that's going to help our fortunes.
Think so.
And there's going to be more with her that's going to help our fortunes as well. In 2025 and 2026, Jan is absolutely killing it on the recruiting trail and is still going after the big fish in the big pond. And I think this is maybe a little bit of a 1 year kind of dip where we'll kind of start to ascend. I'm not going to say that we're going to go to national championship contender next year or anything like that, but it's kind of a 1 year kind of hard crash for us as Iowa fans, possibly. And then, a slow or maybe not so slow, we'll see, ascension to next year. You can turn it around quick in basketball, though. That's one of the things about basketball is you get 2 or 3 really talented people who are just ready to go. You can turn that around real quick.
For sure.
I think Jan's more than capable of getting that via freshman, transfer portal, internal development, whatever you want to say. I think next year's team is set up for a little bit more success than this year's squad.
Let me ask you this, Andrew, now that we have 18 conference teams now in the Big Ten, right? So what does success look like in a super conference then? How would you measure that? Like to me, I'm thinking like measurement of success is like top 5, 6 in the Big Ten. Considering the programs and prestige that we've inherited over from the Pac-12, what we already had in Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan,
Maryland,
Michigan State up on the come up too. What is success defined in this new era of Big Ten? Like there's so many factors into it, not just the Caitlin Clark thing, but like now there's 18 teams. So like to me, if you're a top 5, top 6 team in an 18 team conference, I mean, I think you're still battling for like 4 or 5 national seeds. You know what I mean? Like 4 seed, 5 seed in the big dance type seasons.
Just based off of where the recruiting is, man, so much of it depends upon that. If you can capitalize on the Caitlin Clark momentum. But I think just to define it, to answer your question, consistently being in that top 4 conversation. Because usually if you're in the top 4, that means you have a chance to win the regular season title. And then, keep the stellar Big Ten tournament results, maybe not win it every year. I don't think that's realistic, but be in that semifinals, finish top 4 in the Big Ten tournament, right? So finish top 4 in regular season, finish top 4 in the Big Ten tournament consistently year in, year out. I think that's a realistic expectation that we should have just based off how recruiting is going. Anything more than that is kind of gravy, and I think we will have those kind of peaks where it is more where we win the Big Ten regular season, where we win the Big Ten tournament, where we're in the conversation for a national championship. I think that's going to happen again. It'll just look different because I don't think it'll be based around one singular star like it was with Caitlin Clark. I think it'll be just more of the effect of having more overall talent on the roster.
Sure.
Having 2 or 3, 4, 5, maybe even 5-star players at one time on the roster that are either the starting lineup or a part of the rotation.
My concern here in the early going of the Big Ten season is kind of the regression of those older players, I would say. Okay. Kylie Feuerbach, Sydney Fulter. Like, I don't even think they've been last year's version of themselves.
I would argue that Kylie has been very similar to where she was last year, but definitely in a Fulter's case, that kind of pullback, but it's also like a different role too. And so you're having people like specifically with Feuerbach and a Fulter, they have to step up into different roles that maybe aren't in their wheelhouse.
Sure.
So it's a little rough in that regard, and I'm not sure that you kind of are what you are at that point, and they're being asked to do a little bit more than what I think they're actually capable of. But some of that's because of the youth. At a certain point, though, here, I think it's just going to become a full-on youth movement where you're going to have to just say, I don't know if we're playing for this year anymore. I hope we don't get to that point, but it's kind of, you kind of got to just roll Stremolo and Guyton and all the others out there and just roll with that. Let them get their experience and see what comes.
Yep. So, I mean, I guess the word I was looking for was development, I guess.
Yeah.
From those players, or maybe the lack thereof, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they're not, and maybe there is a combination of you're asking him to perform different roles, like having Stolke in the 4 and putting the ball on the floor. Like
I didn't like that, and then
not,
I think
not a successful experiment whatsoever. I mean, she, 8 foot out maybe is probably her range of shooting. If we're being honest, we don't want her chucking up threes. I don't even necessarily want her in the mid range game. I want her on the fast breaks. I want her, making those cuts and using her elite speed to get down the floor. And I don't know, just not seeing it this year, and that's disappointing because Stolke's my girl too. So
right. I mean, thankfully we have her for another year, and we can get a little bit of an infusion of talent from the freshman class and perhaps the transfer portal yet again. I don't think Jan will hesitate to use the transfer portal to her advantage where it makes sense. And it's just, again, maybe some of the adjustments for a first-time head coach too. I think it's fair if you want to criticize Jan Jensen maybe a little bit, but also you got to have a little bit of patience. First-time head coach, you really can't kind of tell until like year 3. I always kind of feel like year 3 is kind of the launching point for a lot of coaches, or the tipping point to where you can say this is not going well. But I think we'll probably see. Yeah. I mean, the jury's still out. I don't think you want to say anything crazy like, oh, Jan Jensen wasn't right for this job. But by year 3, if this is where we are, then I think that's obviously a conversation at that time.
You say this is where we are. We're 12-5, right? So
right. I guess just
now, if we were 5-12 and like Ofer in the Big Ten, then
we talked about it before with women's basketball, where there's the opportunity for more blue bloods to kind of emerge. To not have Iowa become one of those off the heels of the Caitlin Clark era would be kind of devastating, honestly.
No, it would be really bad,
actually. But I have full faith that Jan Jensen's the right person to guide the program and get us there eventually. I just don't think it's happening in year 1. I think that's going to be more of a year 2, possibly a year 3 type of development.
I mean, and like hindsight 2020, who would you even have hired otherwise?
Yeah, right. That's what I don't know. I mean, you could say open it up to a national search. And they could have done that. They chose not to. But I don't know. I don't know who you would get.
I know I called for Jenny Baranchuk to come home, but
that's it. That's maybe the name. Perhaps Drake's head coach would consider it. But I don't know if I would take that over Jan Jensen. So, yeah, that's a fair question. I don't know who I would hire instead.
Right. And again, it's silly to even talk about 17 games into her first season, her freshman season, if you will.
Right.
But so, I mean, the jury's out. I think year 3, I think I agree with you, is the benchmark season of what are we doing here? What's their identity?
Yes.
What do they play for? Because it's not Lisa Bluter anymore. So it's weird. And we don't like change because we've had so much success in recent years, right?
Yeah. And that's, I'm glad that you brought up the word identity, because that's kind of what's missing with this team is what's their clear identity. I mean, it was obviously Caitlin Clark for the past 4 years.
There's not one here.
What?
There isn't one here thus far.
Right, exactly. I thought maybe the identity would be Hannah Stolke is our best player. We're going to play her at the 5. We're going to force feed her. We're going to do everything, get her close to 20 points per game. All right. And I think that maybe should be the identity, and then everybody else play around that. And who knows? It may develop that way still, but that's kind of the thing is, or maybe the identity should have been defensive minded, defensive focused, that kind of thing. But there's no identity on either end that I can.
No.
I turn on a game and I can't tell you what they're going for on either end.
Right.
So that's something that I think will develop kind of in time too. But for the rest of the season, like we talked about, probably got to pull off this win tonight and, defend your home court against the inferior teams, steal 1 or maybe 2 on the road, or maybe steal 1 against USC or UCLA at home. I don't know if that's realistic with this current team, but you never know what could happen on any given night in college athletics, right? Iowa could just get hot.
And I wouldn't even necessarily say the Nebraska program's an inferior squad.
No, I wasn't saying Nebraska was. I was more looking at like the
Illinois, Indiana. Well, the current Indiana
not
team.
Indiana.
Illinois.
I was more saying like we have a home game against like Rutgers, who's sub 500. That's probably a team you shouldn't lose to at home.
Right.
Yeah, this is not an easy schedule because in February especially.
You called them opportunities. February is the month of opportunity.
February is a month of opportunity because it's USC at home, at Minnesota, who's ranked 16-2, at Nebraska, who we see how that's going. Rutgers at home, I feel like you can pencil that in. At Ohio State, number 9 team in the country. UCLA, host UCLA. Go to Michigan, who's 12-5, decent team. Finish the year against Wisconsin. You should probably hold serve in that one. So there's really only 2 games in February and March that you can feel confident about and say those are wins. The rest are either toss-ups at best or significant underdogs.
Wow.
So, and then the rest of January, right? It's on the road, the next 2 games after this one. So this is where losing to both Maryland and Indiana at home is kind of devastating. You needed one of those 2, probably the Indiana game. You needed one.
Yeah, Maryland didn't shock me by any means. Indiana for sure.
Right, and I wouldn't consider the Maryland home loss to be a bad loss, quad 1 loss, right?
Yeah.
And by 8 points after you were getting blown out. But at Oregon, at Washington is not easy. Northwestern. So there it is. Northwestern, Rutgers, and Wisconsin are 3 teams at home. You got to win all of those. No margin for error in those games.
Yep.
And then you got to find a way to scratch out, I don't know, and maybe 2 or 3, probably 3 wins from the rest that I mentioned.
Yeah.
That's a tall task.
Yep.
I think for this squad. So, yeah, it's kind of what we talked about with the men's team, and I think we can transition to them if you, unless you wanted to slide anything else real quick about the women's team before we just took a little break and transition to men's basketball.
Let's go ahead and hit halftime, man.
All right, let's hit it. We'll be back.
Making great tasting bourbon requires the perfect combination of ingredients, conditions, and time. The longer it rests, the better it tastes. Revelton Distillery's new single barrel bourbon is made from 80% corn, sourced 100% from Iowa farmers. And unlike mass-produced bourbons, each barrel of Revelton's single barrel bourbon is unique, proofed on when it tastes best. As they like to say, it'll be ready when it's ready. And to ensure the highest standards of quality and flavor, owners Rob and Christy Taylor oversee the production and bottling. Every single barrel. Iowa born, Iowa aged, Iowa bottled. Try the new single barrel bourbon from Iowa's own Revelton Distillery. ReveltonDistillery.com. Whether you're buying, selling, or refinancing your home, or if it's simply time to renovate the one you're already living in, you need an experienced mortgage professional to help you analyze your financing options and to make sure the closing goes smoothly. And that's exactly what you get when you call Kyle Lehman at Wintrust Mortgage. Kyle's experience and expertise, coupled with Wintrust's rates and programs, ensures you'll get the mortgage that's right for you. You may even qualify for down payment assistance. Before you reach out to a realtor, call Kyle and get pre-qualified, empowering you to start shopping for the home of your dreams. Call Kyle at 515-473-0546. Kyle Lehman, Wintrust Mortgage, 515-473-0546. In 2023, a crack Green Beret named Dan Douglas retired his military command and promptly escaped to a full-time career in real estate. Today, this man is wanted by home buyers and sellers who want to survive the process without spending a fortune. If you have a home to sell or want to buy one, maybe you can hire Dan Douglas at Green Beret Realty. You can find him at greenberetrealty.com. greenberetrealty.com.
All right, we are back. Thank you to our sponsors as always. And college basketball just kind of flies at us fast and furious during the season. 2 games have happened since the last time that we were on last Thursday. Indiana, Iowa on a Saturday night in Carver. And I thought that game would be close. I thought Indiana kind of leaned in on their strengths were kind of Iowa's weaknesses, and that made me pretty nervous going into that game. But Iowa was geared up for that one, and Fran McCaffrey, I believe, only has 1 loss against Mike Woodson in the Mike Woodson era of Indiana basketball. So every time
beginning of the end of Mike Woodson,
getting blown out by Iowa and then getting blown out by almost 30 to Illinois at home in Assembly Hall. I think that's gonna do it for the Mike Woodson era at Indiana basketball. And I'm glad that Fran McCaffrey could absolutely own Mike Woodson in virtually every matchup that they had with one another. So that was one that Iowa couldn't afford to lose. We kind of talked about it with the women. That was where Iowa needed to stack that win here in January because it's similar to the women. The schedule really gets tough in February, March for the Iowa men. So you got to really stack wins. Tough schedule this week for Iowa. They went on the road to USC, played a USC team that's really surging, that beat Illinois on the road. And by virtue of beating Iowa, actually became a quad 1 loss for Iowa. They were in quad 2 by 1 spot. They were 76. they hit into the 71 range, 70 range by beating Iowa. So Iowa keeps their no loss. Yeah, no loss, quad 2 or lower, which is good. That is good. Drew, did you stay up and watch that game at all? You get a chance to stay up
last night?
That was Tuesday
2 nights
night,
ago,
I believe.
I went to bed at halftime with it tipping off at 9:30. I was the first half didn't look all that great.
No, it was not good. And we we've kind of seen this problem before. The defense on the road is kind of non-existent. Defense at home seems to be a lot better. I don't know what it is, but
I was gonna ask you that, like, what makes it defense travels just like in football.
It should. You really think it should, but it's like we get more pumped up at home in front of the home crowd and put in more effort on defense in front of the home crowd. It's really strange.
Yeah, we only give up 85 instead of 115, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, against like Indiana, we gave up 60, but I mean, Indiana's a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's an interesting phenomenon. Yeah, USC's hot right now. Definitely playing their way into the tournament. Have a bunch of transfers. But just a lot of concerning things. I mean, getting out rebounded again, getting out physical. Iowa just kind of, they did make a late charge, but you never felt like it was really going to come through.
Yeah.
Necessarily. There were guys who played well. Owen Freeman had a career high in points and finished with 23 and 6 and a couple blocks. He had a nice night. I feel like we should have played through Owen Freeman a little bit more. Tried to slow the game down a little bit, but we were content to just go up and down, play a fast-paced game with USC. USC loved that because they have plenty of athletes.
Yeah, that's what
they love going up and down too. So I feel like if the defense isn't there, which it's kind of not, Iowa needs to be more content with slowing the game down a little bit.
Yeah, because that's how Eric Musselman's teams like to play too, is that fast break. Like, I think he can out Fran when it comes to that type of basketball.
Right.
I don't know how you feel about Eric Musselman. I know the general public doesn't necessarily care for him, but I love that guy. I think he's a great coach.
He's certainly better than the coach that I was going to face tomorrow night. By the way, Iowa went hard after St. Thomas in the transfer portal. We didn't get any real traction, but St. Thomas is put up 24 points, 9 boards, and 7 assists against Iowa.
Of course he did.
And man, this team would be awesome if we had St. Thomas hanging out on the squad. But alas, we do not. And he's at USC. But we are facing a UCLA team who has just a lot of things going on. I don't know if you've paid attention to the news recently, some of the things that Mick Cronin has done and said. It feels like a coach who's intentionally trying to get fired at some points. Like, yeah, I don't think that's what he's doing, but it's very strange what's going on with Mick Cronin and UCLA right now.
Didn't he just take a team to the Final Four like 2 years ago?
Just a few years ago.
There were two. There were two. Was there 2 or 3 Pac-12 teams in the Final Four?
I can't remember. I think
there was 2 at least.
You're believing that there were 2. Because Gonzaga is kind of feels like a Pac-12 team. That might be it.
Maybe. I don't know. Anyway.
Anyways. 2022,
what was his name?
2023.
Johnny Juzang.
Yeah, Johnny Juzang, Tiger Campbell. Yeah. That was all the way back in 2020, 2021, where they kind of made a run. They were an 11 seed and made a run to the Final Four.
Yeah.
And eventually lost to Jalen Suggs and Gonzaga in the Final Four. Jalen Suggs hits the game-winning 3 in a tie game. I remember that. That was great.
Yep.
Great March Madness moment. So, yeah, they have that success. They've been to the Sweet 16. They brought back that roster, but the past couple of years, specifically last year, was a rough year, 16 and 17, fifth place in the Pac-12, didn't make the NCAA tournament, didn't make any kind of postseason. This year, they're 11 and 6. They were ranked at one point, and they have kind of just fallen off a cliff here with 4 losses in a row on the road to Nebraska, home against Michigan, at Maryland, at Rutgers. The Rutgers loss, I think, is probably the worst one out of all of those. I think the 3 other ones are kind of understandable. I think both Nebraska on the road is tough, and Michigan is really good in year 1 under Dusty May. Yeah. So Michigan's going to be in the conversation for winning the Big Ten. But the wheels of after that Michigan game is when Mick Cronin kind of called out his players, said a lot of them think they're better than what they actually are. We have guys that are too high on their own supply and all this kind of stuff, and they don't want to work, and I don't need to be here because I have plenty of wins. Those were the words out of his mouth. Like, I've won enough. I have all the wins. And he called out his assistant coaches too. He said, we've got assistant coaches that don't want to work.
And he went full Bud Kilmer from Varsity Blues.
Yeah, he did. He became a villain to his own team. And then the next game turns around and gets kicked out against Maryland, and then says in the post game that he asked to be kicked out like Gene Hackman and Hoosiers. Is he just going full Disney movie basketball coach on us, or just is this job just a joke to him now? I don't understand what's going on with Mick Cronin, but it seems like he's run off the deep end.
Isn't UCLA the most winningest program in basketball history still?
Yeah, they're up there. And I mean, obviously, a lot of that was the Wooden era, although they've had some success in more recent times. But in the Steve Lavin days, they did have some success with Lavin. No success with Steve Alford.
Yeah, so. Fuck that guy.
Mick Cronin is better than that guy, even after all the things that he's done and said this week. But, yeah, I guess we're getting UCLA at a good time is what I'm trying to say here.
Okay.
We're playing a team that the wheels are kind of just falling off, I think. 11 and 6, complete free fall. Who knows how they're going to respond against Iowa. Iowa on the road, we don't have any road wins yet. But as bad as the situation UCLA is, this is still a quad 1 chance at this point in time. Yeah. I don't know why, but it is.
Because it only needs to be top 75 to be a quad 1 on the road.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And they're within that still. But for the rest of the season, Iowa really kind of needs this game for their NCAA tournament chances. We talked about it with the Indiana game. They needed that one. They got it. They need this game.
Couldn't agree more.
On the ring. All right. Let's talk about UCLA's actual players here because I don't know enough about them. Tyler Bilodeau, 6'9" forward, is their leading scorer. Sebastian Max, a good guard. Eric Daly, another forward there. Those are their 3 leading scorers. Kobe Johnson is a USC transfer in, mainly a defensive player, a really awesome defensive player at that. Sky Clark, who played for Illinois at one point, was a guard for them. That's kind of their point guard. They have a few other guys as well. They're kind of a deep team. They're a deeper team than Iowa is, certainly. So that is maybe something that could work to their advantage. But I don't know. It's not like they have a ton of big guys, so they're not going to necessarily hit us in our weak points by throwing a lot of big guys at us, or being as physical as USC was with us. Felt like USC was physical. I feel like USC is a way more physical team than UCLA, although they do have Sebastian Mack, who I mentioned plays a lot like Desmond Claude, who just went through the lane at kind of seemingly at will against Iowa.
Yeah.
So there is that concern, but I like this matchup for Iowa. Just the guys on the floor, everything going on around the UCLA program. I kind of like this matchup for Iowa.
Offensively, I think if they put out the same effort they did at USC, I think they win.
Right.
I agree with you that it's just it's a hot mess in LA, literally, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah. So thoughts out to those guys. Hopefully, everything's getting, everything's calming down out there. By all means, that looks like that they're starting to make some headway on the fires out there. So thoughts are with those folks out there. But
right.
Maybe just too many distractions for this UCLA team, and Iowa has enough talent to beat them. Player for player, I think, at least in the starting lineup. So, I mean, you get Peyton Sanford out there with let's call it 4.5 3-pointers mid. You hit the over. You hit the over, they win. Under, they lose.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good indicator.
Now, granted, we scored 90 points against Wisconsin and still lost by 30, but whatever. But
right, 26, but yeah.
I gave too much credit. Yeah, sorry.
I'm very exact with all that. I don't know why.
Don't short us our points.
Yeah, don't short us. Don't short us at all.
No,
I really love the way that we're playing offensively, specifically with Drew Thelwell in there. I like what Brock Harding's done. I love him. Freeman, Josh Dix, goes without saying.
You love Dix.
I do. I do love Dix. I think we're just kind of short on the rotation. This team just kind of needed some reliable guys off the bench, and we had that when Thelwell was coming off the bench, but I don't question the move to put him in the starting lineup. I think that's worked out for the better. But we just kind of needed a little bit more from the bench. Kind of stinks that Cooper Koch can't get over whatever's going on with him. I think he would have been
Are they medical redshirting him?
That's a good question. I don't know if that's going to happen. He's currently under the amount of games where he needs to be to medical redshirt, so they have to make a decision about whether they're going to medical redshirt him or not. I would probably be in favor of doing it because I do think he could contribute something to this year's team, but I don't think it's enough to where you need to burn through that medical redshirt. Yeah. There. Let him have 4, hopefully, full years at Iowa after this year and do his thing in 4 full years at Iowa or less. Depends on how he develops. So you got to make a decision on him and need probably, one of Price or Seydou Traore to really start clicking for the long-term outlook of the season.
Yeah, Traore didn't look very good in the first half there the other night. I did notice. I did take notice of watching him specifically on individual plays and effort, and I don't know. There was nothing to write home about in the 10 minutes I saw him play there. So,
yeah, and we got to remember he's a redshirt freshman, so things aren't necessarily clicking for him. He's going to have 3 years of eligibility. I think an offseason of work will do him a lot of good. I think there's been flashes, specifically earlier and then on conference, before he got injured, that were pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, recently it's been rough out there. I think Price has had good moments too. but just not consistent. And that's something that's going to have to build. Big news for on the recruiting front, potentially. Again,
okay.
We talked about the transfer last week from Miami, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a good recruiting win, and it hasn't been announced yet formally, but I know that Iowa was in on Joshua Lewis, a incoming freshman next year who would be, by the 247 Sports composite rankings, the fourth highest recruit in Iowa basketball history, below Tyler Smith, Joe Wieskamp, and Adam Woodbury. So this kid would be the fourth highest. He's a 6'6" small forward who has shooting guard, ball handling skills, so he could play as sort of a bigger shooting guard.
I would like that.
Yeah, and his thing is above average rebounder, above average defender, needs work on his 3-point shot, but can drive. Definitely has a lot of game as a driver, getting to the rim and finishing, but definitely needs work on that outside jumper. Kind of like what we talked about with IJA, Isaiah Johnson or Aragu coming in, can get to the rim, can rebound really well, can defend really well, but outside shot needs work. Similar thing with Traore that we've seen. So all this kind of, if we do end up landing Josh Lewis, which it seems like we will, because he's ready to make a commitment. Iowa was his only visit after decommitting from South Florida. So I think you can kind of read the tea leaves there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he didn't visit anywhere else, and now he's ready to lock in a commitment.
We just need to see these highly rated players come to fruition, especially like the ones that are not necessarily legacy players, like Wieskamp, right. The Murray twins, stuff like that. Something outside of local, outside the borders coming in, I think would help the recruiting trail a lot.
The last one was Tyler Cook. The last one that was highly regarded, that was non-legacy, it was Tyler Cook, and I would say he did fairly well.
He was pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish he shouldn't have left early. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, if he would have been on that next year's team with the sophomore Garza, that would have been kind of ferocious.
That would have been crazy.
Anyways, and a Wieskamp. Anyways, I digress. But I think
and a Bohannon.
Right. Yeah. we would have kind of been loaded for Bear. Yeah, I remember that. I felt like Iowa could have really turned a corner if we had gotten Cook back, but
yep.
That's all right. I think what I'm seeing from the past two, and we haven't mentioned any of the other incoming freshmen, maybe a little bit, but Fran is just kind of recruiting different types of guys than what I've seen him recruit in the past and landing those, and specifically focused on guys whose strong suits are on the defensive end and on the rebounding end.
Yeah.
And the offensive game was maybe a little bit raw. I'm kind of okay with that because I feel like Fran and his staff they can develop guys on offense. I feel confident in their ability to develop guys on offense. So you can take a guy that maybe doesn't have the most offensive skill and develop him.
I mean, that was Tyler Cook.
Right. But that kind of excites me. And I think next year could be a really, really good year. It just depends upon the decisions of guys like Owen Freeman and Josh Dix. You bring Owen Freeman and Josh Dix back to next year's team with some of this incoming talent and, Chris Taggio and Seydou Traore probably playing a bigger role next year. And then you've got incoming freshmen. And then I know that they're going to try to do things in the transfer portal again.
There's not really talk that Freeman and Dix are leaving, though. Is there? Like, is that actually like they can actually be drafted? Like,
Freeman and Dix are going to pop up on NBA radars. I mean, I've paid enough attention to the NBA draft, how they draft on potential and what they look at, and they don't look at what you are now. They look at you and they think this is what you can be. And Owen Freeman, they see a solid two-way big player that's shown flashes of an outside shot.
Luka can't even stick on a roster, Andrew. Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, Owen Freeman's more athletic than Luka Garza, so they see the little bit more.
Is he?
Yes. Yeah, and they see the shot blocking capability. They see a potential rim protector, a two-way big with the rim protecting capabilities, the abilities to switch out. He's shown that, and the ability to let the three fly and develop that as part of his offensive game, along with the moves he has around the basket.
Okay, all right.
I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh no, they're absolutely first round picks."
I was going to say
they're. I know what the kind of just following the NBA draft, kind of what their thought process is with it. I don't think it's a surefire thing, but I think it's definitely a consideration for both of them. The other thing is there's probably going to be legitimate teams. We know that tampering happens.
True.
There's probably going to legitimately be offers out there to transfer other places than Iowa.
Illinois.
Yeah, there's gonna be teams that reach out.
Okay. So, all right.
Owen Freeman and Dix back to Iowa next season really would have me very excited about the prospects of next year's team.
Okay.
Especially with the wins that Fran has had on the recruiting trail lately here.
I agree. I agree with you. And I guess I didn't see any scenario where they would leave. So
yeah, it's out there, man. It's out there. Okay. So
all right.
Yeah, I think there's reason for optimism, right? Like we've talked about with new Kirk, new Fran, ? Portal Fran. I don't want to get carried away, but it is good that we're seeing him go after guys that are different than what he's had in the past, showing a willingness to recruit something different than what he's had in the past. So,
breaking news: Taylor McCabe tied the game 42.
Let's go. Let's go. Awesome. Well, I think we just need to make a pick here on the Iowa UCLA men's game.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and take Iowa as a 6.5 point underdog, man. We talked about all that. I don't understand being a 6.5 point underdog to this UCLA team. So I will go ahead and take Iowa to win by 5 on the road. I think it'll be something like 78-73. Iowa over UCLA.
Wow, that's pretty low scoring.
Yeah, I do think it'll be a little bit lower scoring affair. But give me Iowa by 5.
I also have an Iowa by 5, but I'm 91-86 in overtime.
Ooh. Oh, my heart cannot take overtime that late on a Friday night. And oof. You're going to have to find a new co-host next week.
A win's a win, buddy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that will mainly do it unless you've got any other great topics you want to toss in. But I think I will call it a night here on the Hawks Eye View.
Iowa wrestling 7-0, duels, undefeated in the duel front. They beat Wisconsin 45-0 in their last outing last Sunday.
Let's go.
And they host the Fighting Illini tomorrow night in Carver Hawkeye Arena, 6 p.m. Should be another ass whooping.
Yeah, I saw some talk that Illinois is like ranked.
I don't see that on the screen here. They might be.
Okay. I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. We're gonna whoop them. We're gonna whoop Penn State. It's gonna be awesome.
Okay,
National championship.
Now you went too far.
Oh, sorry. I do that. Anyways, that'll do it for us for tonight. Thank you, as always, for listening to the show. Have a great night, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.